From John Calvin's commentary on the book of Ephesians, chapter 6, verses 12 and 13. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, having done all, to stand. For we wrestle not. To impress them still more deeply with their danger, he points out the nature of the enemy, which he illustrates by a comparative statement, not against flesh and blood. The meaning is that our difficulties are far greater than if we had to fight with men. There we resist human strength. Sword is opposed to sword. Man contends with man. Force is met by force, and skill by skill. But here the case is widely different. All amounts to this, that our enemies are such as no human power can withstand. By flesh and blood the apostle denotes men who are so denominated in order to contrast them with spiritual assailants. This is no bodily struggle. Let us remember this when the injurious treatment of others provokes us to revenge. Our natural disposition would lead us to direct all our exertions against the men themselves. But this foolish desire will be restrained by the consideration that the men who annoy us are nothing more than darts thrown by the hand of Satan. While we are employed destroying those darts, we lay ourselves open to be wounded on all sides. To wrestle with the flesh and blood will not only be useless, but highly pernicious. We must go straight to the enemy, who attacks and wounds us from our concealment, who slays before he appears. But to return to Paul, he describes our enemies as formidable, not to overwhelm us with fear, but to quicken our diligence and earnestness. For there is a middle course to be observed. When the enemy is neglected, he does his utmost to oppress us with sloth, and afterwards disarms us by terror, so that, ere the engagement has commenced, we are vanquished. By speaking of the power of the enemy, Paul labors to keep us more on the alert. He had already called him the devil, but now employs a variety of epithets to make the reader understand that this is not an enemy who may be safely despised. Against principalities, against powers. Still, his object in producing alarm is not to fill us with dismay, but to excite us to caution. He calls them princes of the world, but he explains himself more fully by adding, of the darkness of the world. The devil reigns in the world, because the world is nothing else than darkness. Hence it follows that the corruption of the world gives way to the kingdom of the devil. For he could not reside in a pure and upright creature of God, but all arises from the sinfulness of men. By darkness, it is almost unnecessary to say, are meant unbelief and ignorance of God, with the consequences to which they lead. As the whole world is covered with darkness, the devil is called the prince of this world, John 14:30. By calling it wickedness, he denotes the malignity and cruelty of the devil, and at the same time reminds us that the utmost caution is necessary to prevent him from gaining an advantage. For the same reason, the epithet spiritual is applied. For, when the enemy is invisible, our danger is greater. There is emphasis, too, in the phrase, in heavenly places. For the elevated station from which the attack is made gives us greater trouble and difficulty. Paul does not ascribe to devils a principality, which they seize without the consent and maintain in spite of the opposition of the divine being, but a principality which God, in righteous judgment, yields to them over the wicked. The inquiry is, not what power they have in opposition to God, but how far they ought to excite our alarm. and keep us on our guard. Nor is any countenance here given to the belief that the devil has formed and keeps for himself the middle region of the air. Paul does not assign to them a fixed territory, which they can call their own, but merely intimates that they are engaged in hostility and occupy an elevated station. Wherefore take unto you. Though our enemy is so powerful, Paul does not infer that we must throw away our spears, but that we must prepare our minds for the battle. A promise of victory is, indeed, involved in the exhortation, that ye may be able. If we only put on the whole armor of God, and fight valiantly to the end, we shall certainly stand. On any other supposition, we would be discouraged by the number and variety of the contests. And therefore, he adds, in the evil day. By this expression, he rouses them from security, bids them prepare themselves for hard, painful, and dangerous conflicts, and, at the same time, animates them with the hope of victory. For amidst the greatest dangers they will be safe. And having done all, they are thus directed to cherish confidence through the whole course of life. There will be no danger which may not be successfully met by the power of God, nor will any who, with this assistance, fight against Satan, fail in the day of battle.